holidays are almost here, and if you're selling stuff online, you know it's crazy. So use ShipStation.com. It's the fast and easy way to manage and ship all of your holiday orders from one place with ShipStation.
Hey guys, what's up, what's up? How's it going? How are we this evening? Hey guys, what's up, what's up? Okay, that sounded fine. So I can go ahead and mute this. Alrighty, so I'm ready when you guys are. Just start hitting up questions. Let's do this thing. It is late, so I'm gonna get coffee started here while you guys get your first questions up. Okay. Oh man, alright. I'm good to go. Let's go ahead and restart this so that way it's up at 100%. There we go. Look at that. Okay. Alrighty, so I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of this so you guys don't have to look at my face. Well, at least like an inception of my face. Okay. So I'm good to go on my side. I've got stuff pulled up. Make sure I get this going here. Okay. Sweet. I'm good to go. Oh man, this is late though. I'm not used to this. My bedtime is 6 p.m. Just kidding, I don't actually ever go to bed. For DCUSH, the terrifically terrible 1830s. Madeline's like, I'm going to get the first question. I will go ahead and copy paste right out of Canvas so that way he knows what he's talking about. Oh, 1 second. I hear an unhappy tot. I'm going to get back. I'll explain this to you while I'm with Booker. It's okay. Yeah, it's all right, big guy. Oh, okay. So here's Booker, guys. We were napping, and now we're back awake here, and Daddy's just gonna hold him until we're ready to go. Okay. So, you doing okay, big guy? Yeah, retired. Yeah. So there's a rule about live streaming, Book, is that there's no crying in live streaming. Okay? It's like no crying in baseball. Which, funny enough, I have a baseball mug right now. Okay, you ready? Yeah, do you want to say hi? You want to say hi? You feeling tired? Yeah. Okay, so let's see what we got here. We're in the age of Jackson. You want to say hi, Booker? Say hi. Say hi. Okay. Oh, don't drop that. There you go. Okay. So let's see, right here. Now help me teach this. Okay, I expect you to teach it through lots of, blinking and other movements, okay? Can you do that for me? Alrighty, so what we were looking at in this one, okay, and let me flip my screen here so you guys can see the desktop just a little bit better. Go ahead and transition that. There we go. Okay, so what we were looking here is we had, basically this was a mini lesson that has kind of three seemingly diverse things that don't have much to do in common with each other, but actually do, okay? And so what we looked at first was the Panic of 1837. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and actually jump to a document here, okay? And then I'm going to bold some stuff and highlight some stuff, and that way you guys can understand it a little bit better, okay? So we're just going to basically do an overview of the important points. Okay, I'm going to kind of go back to the objective, and you guys will see kind of like what's important from there, and then we'll kind of make some modifications depending on if you guys are getting it or not. Okay? Yeah. Do you see the toy? Okay, big guy. All right. So, if you don't remember, okay, Jackson's successor, okay, was Martin Van Buren. Okay, it was like his handpicked guy, and so I had highlighted here, and I'll emphasize these here so you guys can see them. That it was partially, so you can see right here, although Van Buren was largely blamed, much of the panic had to do with Andrew Jackson's prior banking and financial policies. Okay, and that's a really, really big point. So it's kind of sad because like Jackson goes through this entire presidency, and then he like leaves Martin Van Buren with this horrible mess to deal with, and part of it is inflation. So something in the very end of Jackson's bank war that you might have seen is that he took all the money out of those big national banks and sends them out to what he called pet banks, and they were state banks essentially. Okay, now what that does is it basically puts more money in the economy. Now that doesn't necessarily sound like a bad thing. However, if there's more money in the economy, basically means those dollars are less. But it's like if there were 1 million iPhones out there compared to 10 iPhones, all of a sudden your iPhones, if there's 10 million of them, they're inherently worth less. Okay, and that's inflation. And so that was part of the problem. But the big one also was this one. Okay, so at the same time, then you have citizens' money, as it says right here, being less valuable. Okay, that's what we call inflation. Jackson, at the very end of his presidency, makes an order. Okay, and we call this the specie circular. Alrighty. Now, what this basically does is it said that if you want to buy land, again, this is right when the United States is really starting to expand westward. And if you want to buy land, then you have to do it in gold or silver, and you can't do it in paper money. So all of a sudden, there's this huge credit crunch. So at the same time, the economy downward spirals into, or rather upward spirals into inflation, it gets seriously, like the money supply gets seriously crunched by this by all of this, because now think about it, you've got all these paper notes that you can't use to buy land, and they're just sitting around. And so, as it says right here, simply put, not enough funds are available because all you're using is gold and silver, and we get a financial panic. Okay. There's other things too, like the wheat crop failed. Okay, and life is pretty awful. And this is yeah, smile. Yawn. So really what it says here is that some historians consider the first major economic crisis in the Industrial Revolution. And that's because this is the big one. There's no social safety nets. Like they say here, unemployment insurance, health insurance. Like, so when you lose a job today, like you go and you claim unemployment, doesn't happen here. It just doesn't exist. 1/3 of Americans working were unemployed, and for those still able to be employed, their wages are cut 30 to 50%. Like, and if you can imagine going from making $7.25 an hour at the jobs you guys sometimes work to all of a sudden $3 an hour, like that's a huge change. Okay, or you just lose your job entirely. And though here's the big effect of it. Okay, was that President Van Buren, mocked as Martin Van Ruin, gets blamed for it. Okay, and then therefore a Whig actually wins the next race, and that's actually a person from Indiana, Henry Harrison, who dies after 3 months in office. So feels bad, man, right? Okay, so what we were looking at here, again, to go back to the objective, was the causes and effects of the Panic of 1837. I feel like we've hit that pretty well. The other thing in here, you guys did this towards the end, okay? You guys did this towards the end, because we actually pushed this back to the end of the block, was why Jackson then also, right before the Panic of 1837, it was in 1834, I think, or really like when things start moving. You can see here that it actually is signed into law in 1830. Okay, and yes, you see here there's some mentions, they say 1830 and 1839, but it's really just throughout all the 1830s. We have Native American removal, and what we were looking at here is the motivations for and against it. Okay, now there's a whole bunch of things in here, and again, I'm not going to try to go through, I'm not going to try to read all of them. Okay, this one's from Andrew Jackson. He says basically that the United States doing this, we will save them. Okay, they will become less savage. It's pretty, in terms of what we would look at now, it's pretty awful writing. Yeah, those are ribbons. Yeah, do you see all the colors? Those are pretty neat, aren't they? That's pretty neat. Yeah, and then basically it'll also say that it'll save them from getting in conflict too. So like Jackson, in some cases, legitimately believes it's a good thing, which I don't know if I necessarily buy. Let's see. Absurd American Aftermath Post-Revolution. I think I did that one last night, Emily. I'm pretty sure. You'll have to go double check me, but go to the one last night, and I think I have it time linked in the description. But I mean, I can hit the highlights again very quickly. There's a whole bunch of other things in here. This is obviously Cherokees not in favor of this. We've been denationalized, disenfranchised. We have neither land nor home nor resting place that can be called our own. That pretty much says it right there. Okay. And then other people. Bless you! Oh my gosh! That was gigantic! Oh, and then a big yawn. Oh my. Oh my. Oh my. Oh my. My goodness, I think they felt that sneeze, Booker. That was gigantic. You tired, baby boy. Yeah. So basically saying here, again, this is from Secretary of War Lewis Cass, who basically said that if we move them, we'll improve them, essentially. And again, I don't know if you buy that. He says if we don't move them, they get wiped out. There's a bunch of stuff here. This is from Andrew Jackson. It's kind of the same thinking. And then this one is actually from a Cherokee who supports the Indian Removal Act. This one's kind of definitely the exception to all of them. But basically he says, like, we're going to get away from all these destructive influences that white people have brought on us. So capitalism, alcohol, Christianity, all these things that aren't the way that we've been living. Yeah, what is that? Does it make noise? Does it make noise? You want to grab it? Okay, you hold on to that. Oh, yeah. That's right. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay, and then there's a little bit of document here on the Trail of Tears, and then that's where you go. So there you go. Now, the last thing was the Whigs that was in here. Okay, and I can sum them up really quickly. Okay, let's go ahead and skip ahead a bunch. Okay, basically, what are the Whigs? They're the anti-Jackson party. Okay, and they're kind of like this smorgasbord of people. They're kind of like the Federalists. Oh, I thought you were about to sneeze again. Oh man, I was so prepped. Oh, that is the biggest yawn I've ever seen. Yes, that is the biggest yawn. And so they are kind of a mix of Jeffersonian Republicans and Federalists. Right, book? You read a book about Thomas Jefferson today, didn't you? I saw it. It was the story of Thomas Jefferson. They didn't have anything in there about Sally Hemings, though, did they? Okay, they're just the anti-Jackson party, and that's the thing to keep in mind with them. They do have some pretty notable members, but the thing that later happens to them is basically they split because there's Northern Whigs and there's Southern Whigs, and they can't get over the slavery question. Huh? Oh, you're fine, love. Okay, there's a bunch of famous ones. Okay, Whig presidents. Again, William Henry Harrison was the first from Indiana. John Tyler, Zachary Taylor, and Millard Fillmore, who no one cares about. So, there you go. Booker's brain. I didn't ask for this. I want to sleep. Yeah. Yes, but you were fussing and you wanted to be held. Stinker. Yeah. And plus, you just wanted to show off for all the people, didn't you? You flirt. Okay. So, trying to see if there's any new questions here. Sorry guys, I'm looking. I pull my chat onto the phone so that way it's not on my desktop. We go over absurd American aftermath post-revolution. Yeah. I know that I might have said that this one was on there. I didn't know. Emily, did you find it, or do you just want me to go ahead over it? I'm fine with either. See, that was back a whole bunch. You're heavy, Tauticus. Okay, you're gonna stand right here, okay? Yeah, you're gonna show off that big belly of yours. Because you're heavy. You're heavy. From Massachusetts. Or from Maya, can you go over the Mexican-American War? Yeah, I can. Mexican-American War is really interesting. It's one of the more, I think it's one of the more really understudied wars that's recently happened, and I think it kind of gets like a short attention span because of the Civil War afterwards. Okay. Yeah, so this one, I did a really in-depth thing on it, but basically what it did was the weaknesses of the articles, okay, and then it compared when the Constitution gets passed, okay, and it kind of looks through that process, what this lesson does, and what I would tell you to focus on. Yeah. Did you see Mommy? Yeah, did you? It kind of really just focuses on anti-federalists and federalists and how they feel about the Constitution. Okay, and really what I would tell you, if you're focusing on this lesson, really this lesson is a perfect seamless tie into this next one, which is the Emily, which is this one, potentially perilous parties and presidents. Say that 15 times fast. Okay, and the reason why is because these presidents deal with a lot of the issues. And you can see, like, the objectives are very, very similar. Oh, another big yawn. Oh, my goodness. You better not keep that mouth open too long, buddy. You'll have, like, a fly in there. Oh, here comes Mommy. Oh. Gotcha. You're fine. You want us passing? Bobo. In the Dominican Republic, they call them Bobos. I was just wanting a review of Shay's Rebellion and the New Jersey and the Virginia plan. Okay, I can do that. Yeah, but I would definitely tell you if you want, like, if you feel like this is a part like you need a review, I would tell you definitely put it in with this lesson because these two are designed to basically be seamless. At least that was my intention. I don't know if it felt that way, but that was the intention. So you said Shay's Rebellion, New Jersey, and Virginia plan. Okay, I can do that really quickly. That's not too hard. Okay, I'm going to explain this on Google Drawing because that'll be easier. Okay, so Shay's Rebellion, right? Okay, so something you have to remember about the Articles, okay, is that the Articles of Confederation, I'm just going to call them the AOC, okay, they did not have a certain thing, okay, and that was they did not have the ability to tax. Okay, now, if the Articles, your government, does not have the ability to tax, that is a huge issue. Okay, simply because taxes pay for everything, like, for example, troops. Okay, and if you do not have a military that can handle things, that is a problem. Okay, so when Shay's Rebellion breaks out, it's essentially a bunch of farmers in Massachusetts who are very upset about debts left over after the Revolution, also some taxes that have been put in by the federal government. Okay, Massachusetts, rightly so, like looks around all the other states and is like, hey, you gonna help us out with this? And no one responds because there's no national infrastructure. Like, for example, like today, if there's a national disaster, there's FEMA, there's the National Guard, you would have like certain departments like the Department of the Interior, which are all designed to take care of this, right? But those are all federal government things. With the Articles, there's an incredibly weak central government. Okay, and so what Shay's Rebellion does is it really proves that that's exactly what it was. It was a very weak central government that couldn't handle things. And when that's proved, basically all the people who at first thought the Articles were a good idea were like, better go back and look at this again. Okay, and so that's essentially Shay's Rebellion. All right, and so that's basically what it proves is that the Articles need revised, and what basically happens end up happening to the rebellion is that Massachusetts manages to raise enough troops to come along and crush it. Okay, now what I would tell you to do is contrast Shay's Rebellion with the one that happens during the Washington administration, which goes very, very differently. Okay, but I'll leave that to you to study and find out more about. Okay, New Jersey plan and Virginia plan. Let's do it. Okay. Oh, actually, let's not do that line. We're going to do it like halfway down because that's going to make more sense. So we have the New Jersey plan. I'm just going to put New J. Okay, and then we have the Virginia plan. Virginia. My grandmother's name is Virginia. Weird connection. Okay. Actually, Lillian, you gave it away. It is called the Whiskey Rebellion. The basic difference there is that, dang it, Lillian, you ruined it. The basic difference there is that Washington comes along with a gigantic army and crushes it. They don't. They simply just the people who now the Federalists who have the Constitution running, they're going to put that stuff down. It's not like the Articles where they couldn't put down Shay's Rebellion. So there's the difference there for you. Okay, it's simply the ability for one government to do something, and then the other one not for it to be able to do something. So there you go. Now we're going to talk about how these come together here, and and then they have a nice baby here at the end of this. Okay, so what's the New Jersey plan? Well, when the Articles are like, okay, they need revised or they need to be changed, there's two proposals. Okay, the small states like the New Jersey plan. All right, so small states like the New Jersey plan. Like New Jersey, it's a small state. Okay, and that is because it was what's called a unicameral legislature. That means one house. Okay, and then the other part of it was that the representation, I'm just going to put reps, they were equal. Okay, so every state, no matter its size, if it were Virginia or Montana, if that were one of the 13 colonies, or Hawaii, they would always have the same number of representatives. Now this should sound very, very similar to the Articles of Confederation. Okay, and that's because it basically was. All they did was they stuck a president on top of it, essentially. Okay, now this person has a bunch of titles, and there's some other things. You can go look up the New Jersey plan of what it proposed. It looks insane. It's incredibly hard to understand. Okay, now the Virginia plan was proposed, okay, by large states. Not surprisingly, because Virginia was the largest state at this time. Not true anymore. Okay, so large states proposed this one, and it calls for what we call today a bicameral legislature, okay, which means there's two houses. Okay, so, and this is the way ours is today. There would be a house. I should have just drawn a house. That would have looked really cool, except it would have looked awful. Okay, and a Senate. Okay, now, the thing that would happen with this is that your representatives were based on, your representatives were equal to, let's make that an arrow. Okay, your representatives are equal to your population. Now you can obviously see how this favors large states. All right, so then what we get is what's called the Great Compromise. This is due to mostly James Madison, who really pretty much designed the U.S. government, with of course the help of quite a few other people. Great Compromise. Okay, and basically what it does is these two plans have a baby. Okay, so I'm just going to highlight in a different color the elements that are taken from each one. Okay, so the Senate, whoops, I turned the E, but okay, so the Senate gets based on an equal number of representatives. Okay, and the House becomes based on your population. Okay. So what it does is it balances the two, and we do end up with this bicameral legislature that was proposed in the Virginia one. Okay, so that's the two plans, essentially. Now, there are some other nuances to it, but that's essentially the difference. Okay? My wife is singing Hamilton the Booker. That's just awesome. Okay, so there you go. Hopefully that helps. And if you need to pause the video, you can pause it and, you know, draw whatever you need to. But there, hey, there's a graphic organizer, man. Okay. Let's see. For my, can you go over the Mexican-American War? Yep. I can do that. My coffee level's getting low. I'll need to make sure I'm doing some more here in a few minutes. Yep. Okay. So just making sure there weren't any other questions that I could answer quickly. Oh no, I'm not going to try to forward all the way through that. That would take forever. Alrighty. Doop 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 doop. Where was this? It wasn't Jackson. It's in westward expansion. Okay. So do you, I don't know if Madeline, you can. And world history kids, for crying out loud, ask some questions. All this dual credit history is going to make my brain explode. I'm just kidding. I like DCUSH. Maybe Madeline got off. Like, she's not on here anymore. Just the war. Okay. I can do that. No probs. Okay. Oregon, we don't need to talk about Oregon Trail. Dude, we should do that. We should just like live stream me just playing Oregon Trail. That would be great. And by great, I mean terrible. That'd be the worst live stream of all time. How many people do you think would watch that? Like legitimately would watch that. And then like I would do like, you know, people would make suggestions to me as to what I would have to do. That would be just a horrible idea. Alright, so Mexican-American War. Okay, what we were looking at here was causes, clashes, consequences. So basically, what made it happen, what happened during it, and then what happened because of it. Okay, and this is a pretty typical way that I explore really most big kind of conflicts in DCUSH, because simply this is not a military history class, and you guys would be really bored if we did that. So we tend to focus on the significant one. What's up, boy? Not much, man. It's late. That's what's up. Me, right now. Okay. Major League Oregon Trail. Dude, instead of Rocket League Oregon Trail? Yeah, sure. So what had happened before this, okay, is that the relationship with Mexico had basically gone downhill, okay, and this is because of Manifest Destiny, and the whole Texas incident had really ruined like that relationship, okay, and when Texas becomes a state in 1845, that basically what we call when somebody severs diplomatic relations, that's a pretty serious incident. Okay, so right now, I'll give you a modern day example. The nation of was it Turkey? I think Turkey threatened to cut off diplomatic relationships with Israel in the last couple days. And that's because the United States recognized Jerusalem as the capital, okay? But when you do something like that, and the reason why it made, like, big news, was because, like, it's really serious. When you cut off diplomatic relationships, that means basically you, except for informally, you stop talking, okay? So that means, like, you're on the brink of war, okay? And again, that's because of Texas and what the United States had essentially supported them in that effort, okay? So when we fast forward then to a year later, when Polk is in office, okay, Polk is quite the expansionist. Okay, he is a big Manifest Destiny guy, whether you think that's right or wrong. Okay, and Polk wants two things: Cali and Mexico. Okay, however, he only wants parts of it, and again, not all of it, because that would mean that Mexicans would, like, the United States does not want to have Mexicans in the United States. It just wants the land, essentially. Okay, so in California, Polk starts, and that's why I have up here the title of it, The Plotting of President Polk. That's because he starts arranging behind the scenes for things to go the way they should. Okay, and so he sends the American Navy actually all the way around. This wasn't on here, but something he does all the way around to California to arrive at just the right time. He arranges for Americans in California to revolt. He sends basically what are soldiers under that guy, that picture right there, John C. Fremont, which is an exploration party, but pretty much, troops essentially into California. Okay, now it's not a large amount of troops, but they're definitely there. Okay, and then what basically happens then is Polk, after setting all this up, or really in the midst of setting all this up, goes to Mexico and says, like, hey, like, we'll buy all this for $30 million. And Mexico's like, you, like, supported the whole, like, Texas thing, and you made them a state, forget you. And when this happens, Polk moves a U.S. Army, okay, and I know you guys may not be able to see this map super clearly, but right here, okay, and please be aware, like, this green area that's kind of in between the two sides, it's disputed territory between the U.S. and Mexico. So already, like, this is a super, oh, hey, thanks for subscribing, young tism. Okay, basically it means that this is already going to be controversial. And so when he sits the troops right here on the Rio Grande, what the U.S. thinks should be the boundary, like, that's already a controversial thing. But then he basically just sits it right there and waits for an incident to occur. Now, some historians say, like, well, it was technically Mexico that started the shooting conflict, like, 2 patrols got into it. Well, I mean, it wouldn't have necessarily happened had those troops been there in the first place, okay? But basically what happens here is that the U.S., through newspapers and a whole bunch of things, Polk is able to whip up enough popular support to get Congress to call for war, okay? And then pretty much what happens from that point on, I'm going to skip the whole Santa Ana thing, okay, is that there's a 3-part effort, okay? So all of a sudden, the U.S. Navy just magically shows up in California. Perfect timing, which is nice. The U.S. forces that were sitting there on the Rio Grande invade south, okay, and that's Zachary Taylor, who later becomes a Whig president, and then the last one is an American invasion of Veracruz, and they basically take that, and you can see right here on the map, they basically take that and march that right to Mexico City. And once they take Mexico City, it's pretty much over. Now, that's not at all to say that it was easy. It took a couple years, but it's a bloody and consequential war for a number of reasons. Okay, and first of all, there's territory. Okay, so the U.S. gets this gigantic chunk of territory, which it did not have before. There's also, and we didn't really get to talk about this in the Civil War, like tactics and those kind of things. It's really the last time that any general gets open field combat before the Civil War. And a lot of what people try to do here is they try to replicate that in the Civil War, and it's just really, really nasty. There's a lot of death. There's a lot of like frontline charges that were okay in the Mexican-American War, but once you start introducing like rifled muskets and stuff, it just gets really, really bloody. But the big thing here was that, and this kind of goes into what the next lesson was, is that already in this war, you have the whole slave question popping up. And because that's, again, this is all about the expansion of slavery, pretty much all the events up to here, right? It was with Texas, for instance. And so when the treaty is signed in Congress, there's this proposal, it's called the Wilmot Proviso. It doesn't pass, okay? But it basically said that slavery couldn't be added to any of the lands that were taken during the war. And again, this never passed, but you can see like the North, this was proposed by a Northerner, it becomes instantly controversial. So, yeah, and it really just shows us that the North and South, even by 1845, aren't getting along. Okay, and we see this, this is a really good example of the Free Soil Party here, which comes from the Wilmot Proviso. Okay, so there you go. Yep, there was all of our Oregon Trail stuff. Okay. Whew. I gotta finish my coffee here. How long have we been on? Already 40 minutes. Gee willikers. What you making? No? What you making? What are you cooking? Food? Good call. I need coffee. Yeah, I do. I'm at 54%, but I'm working my way through this to get back to 100. Is that a bomb? No, it's not a bomb. Is that Gavin? Oh God. You got 8 lessons in different colonies' motivations. Sure. Oh no, when YouTube chat runs away, that's what's gonna happen here. Her parents are like, Mr. Ridgway's doing stuff with bombs on his live stream? And then I lose my job. So there you go. Man, Unit 2 is huge. There was a ton of stuff in that. Okay. So is that 8-7, 8, yeah. Basically, this is... I know, that's what I'm saying, Austin. Okay, I'm almost done with this. I'm almost going to reset my coffee level. There we go. And there we have it. Okay, let's get that reset, and then we'll deal with this guy. Boom, bum, bum, ba, bum, 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 bum. 100%. Keep it 100. All right. So we talked about The Expanse, which, by the way, if you have not seen The Expanse as a television show, it is excellent. Oh, that's right. This was the one where you could pick colonies. Ooh, yeah, this one's devious. So Virginia. Let's rapid fire do these. Okay? I want to make sure we have time to get to questions, because I could talk about colonies for a real long time. So Chesapeake, why there? First place colonized by England, essentially. Okay, and part of this has to do with climate. They thought it was the best place to eventually grow crops. That wasn't their first intention. Okay, but that's part of the reason. They didn't want to go so north that it was so cold. They didn't want to go too south that it was so hot. Okay, he's up, sweetie. You okay? Yes, I am downing iced coffee. It's great. You should try it. I think Madeline knows something about iced coffee. I think we had that. Was that this morning, Madeline, we had that conversation? I can't remember. So, why these colonies? Okay, and specifically, I'm actually going to go back and remind myself of the objectives. Analyze the models of their development and their success failures. Describe different claims and explain how they began in context. Okay. All right, so how they began in context. Well, the first thing that you want to make sure you know about Jamestown is it's done by the Virginia Company. Okay, so the Virginia Company, again, that goes back to mercantilism, state-sponsored capitalism. That's the context. Okay, to explore, convert natives, and find gold. Pretty much what they do. It's settled by gentlemen, which affects things. Basically, there's a whole bunch of things that happen at first. The colony is mismanaged, both administratively and from England. Like administratively, like in the colony. Once John Smith takes over, things go a little bit better. John Smith is a pretty nasty guy in terms of how he sometimes treats Native Americans, but he also like knows when to negotiate. So the colony does survive, and it becomes profitable essentially because of only tobacco. And from that point on, like, tobacco rules Virginia, and it does become insanely successful. If you want to measure it from that point. I just realized I'm not in full screen here. Okay, again, it depends on how you measure this, because like you can measure success of a colony in a whole bunch of ways. If you want to measure it from a social class system or perspective, it's an utter failure. If you want to measure it from a mercantilist perspective, it's spot on. Like, it does exactly what it's supposed to. So the labor system at first, okay, speaking of social class, was something called indentured servants. And so again, these were Brits, normally poor Brits, who made a deal. They would be given a right to the colony. They signed contracts for roughly 5 to 7 years of work, and then if they survive it, they're given their own land, like a set of tools, a place to live, kind of like a basic start to become a planter. However, the planters who own these indentured servants and the indentured servants, the system that they had set up between the two and some of the contracts, and you can go back and read these, they're stunning, is basically designed to keep those servants in near slavery. Okay, and there's a whole bunch of things that would reset basically their time period, and the odds of them living are extremely low, and so that's why they use them, because if they die, they don't have to pay them, so they just keep importing and importing and importing them. But again, people are willing to come because it's better than, the whole thing with primogeniture in England, or the Industrial Revolution in England, where you just can't find work. With that in mind, this system basically gets adapted to slaves later on. And so once servants start to live longer, that's when slavery starts to come into place, because essentially indentured servants just become unprofitable. And when black slaves begin to be used in the colony, that is where we start to see the first signs. Now, again, historians differ here as to whether they say it's when blacks begin used, that's when we start to see the idea of race come in, or we don't know if race was the reason why black slaves are starting to be used. There's kind of like a chicken and the egg development kind of there. But that's when we start to see really this idea of like a white planter class and a slave farming class. But again, like how you define if that was successful depends on your point of view. Okay, Maryland. Oh, book. I shouldn't have let him sleep so much this afternoon.
Okay.
You think that's it? why he's fussing. Okay. Oh, that's gonna bother me that K is not bolded. Okay, I see that. Okay. So what's the point of this colony? Well, the context here is King Charles I of England secretly sympathizes with Catholics, and so this one actually is designed to have Maryland as a refuge for them, because again, England and Catholicism do not go along. We talked about that last night, actually. Okay. Now, is this colony successful? Yes, eventually, as a tobacco colony, but not as a Catholic refuge colony. Okay. Essentially, what happens is that there's one guy in charge. His name is Lord Calvert. We'll call him, or George Calvert. We'll later call him Lord Baltimore. Okay, because he was, and that's how Baltimore gets his name. And he kind of runs the show at first. And kind of how that changes is that they get a just kind of like Virginia, which gets the House of Burgesses. The kind of rich people in Maryland create a representative assembly. They eventually grant religious toleration to actually all Christians, which was very unusual. So it kind of depends like on what you mean for success. If you want to say, again, it's from the we go to the colonies to make money, sure, it's successful. If you want to say as a Catholic refuge, nope, not really. And eventually what will happen, and this happens in the Dominion of New England, is that Maryland gets flipped into being a Protestant-only colony, or an Anglican, actually, only colony, specifically. Yeah, so, okay, so there you go. There's the Northern Colonies, and so I did Maryland and Virginia. Actually, those are the Southern Colonies, excuse me. Lillian, do you want me to do the Northern ones, too? Unless somebody has another question, because I want to make sure I'm kind of giving, like, a diversity of questions here, too. You know, topics and genres. Not that we did, like, you know, 1,000 of them in, you know, 18 weeks or whatever. Okay, so unless somebody has something or posts something, I'll very briefly go over the Northern Colonies. The biggest thing here was that you understand Massachusetts, okay? And that was the Puritans, okay? They call themselves separatists, and... Big yawn? Yeah, he was doing that with me, too. And again, the big motivation for them is that they're shaped by their conflict with the Church of England. Okay. Sorry, I'm just reading what you said, Lillian. So the motivation for them is to migrate. And it's to get away from that conflict because they want to, it's not that they want freedom of worship, it's that they want to enforce religious beliefs on themselves and others. They want to essentially persecute themselves and other people and make sure that they're seeing things right. Okay, so we talked about the Mayflower Compact. That's a good example of self-government. Okay, again, like salutary neglect kind of thing, right? Spring, that the first winter sucks. Okay, eventually that the Puritan nestling there in Plymouth and other places expands to become what's called the Massachusetts Bay Colony, which is entirely run by Puritans. Okay, and there's lots of little rules here. Okay, in some cases, yeah, we talked about that things were very, very formal. It's like the Bible's used as a legal guide, for instance, which is in the United States today would be really, really strange to experience. Okay. There's no religious tolerance, but there are some like other things that aren't as strict, and so we kind of talked about like how marriage, like it's not necessarily sexually strict, although like there's certainly parts of it where if you've read like the Scarlet Letter, that's a really kind of influential book that shows you what that's like. Okay, so the last thing that we said that the Puritans will always struggle with is that eventually they want this ideal to be a shining example to the world of what Christianity could be. Okay, again, this kind of goes back to them like wanting to be the elect, that they're going to be saved, and the dilemma for them is they live on Earth. They're humans, and so how do you live in but not of the world? And that's a really, really hard thing that the Puritans can't figure out. Now, again, this kind of goes back to what we call the declension model. So you have this ideal that you want to live up to, but then you fall into sin, and then you have this renewal of faith, but then again, you fall back into sexual or monetary sin, or, you know, et cetera, and it just keeps going. Now, there's some people who disagree with this declension model, and I think rightly so. It's not necessarily the answer to everything, but it really kind of demonstrates to you kind of like what the Puritans want and the struggle I think that they have. And so one eventual solution, not the only solution they have, is what's called the gospel of wealth. That one of these sins, wealth, isn't actually a sin. It's a sign that actually God is blessing you, essentially. Okay, and this gospel of wealth is actually really, really hardcore preached even to this day in a lot of Christian churches. There's a lot of people out there who really buy into this. And again, I'm not saying that's right or wrong, it just is what it is. Okay, so there you go. Now Rhode Island, okay, very quickly, okay. Rhode Island is set up for religious toleration because Roger Williams and Anne Hutchinson do not get along with the Puritans. Okay, summarize that one for you. Okay, now Pennsylvania is a really weird one. William Penn is the founder, okay, not the Quaker Oats guy. He basically wants to create a different model of colony, okay, and he's a Quaker, so he tries to actually, like, deal fairly with the Lenape Indians that are there. I think it's Lenape or Lenape, and the pronunciation's going to escape me, but he tries to do things fairly, to the best of his ability, and when Philadelphia is founded, the city of brotherly love is the name because he legitimately wants the colony to be that. And so it eventually becomes like this model of like religious freedom and self-government and a few other things that are actually kind of an interesting and somewhat positive, I guess we could say, development. So there you go. Hopefully that's good stuff, man. Yeah, you know what? Somebody said Georgia was I looked that up. My wife said that Georgia was a penal colony, and I think parts of that are true, but not all of it. And I don't know why. Somebody in my master's class corrected me on that, and I need to look up more about it. In fact, I'm just going to do that right now. Let's look up founding of the Georgia colony, but I actually want like a good authoritative source on this. todayingeorgiahistory.org. Well, at least it's a .org. George II. Okay, so that, if you guys don't know who George II is, that's the guy right before George III in the American Revolution.
Crazy.
Yeah, and George III was a little crazy. We don't exactly know what was wrong with him mentally, but... Okay, so let's see what we got here. Georgia would be a philanthropic and military enterprise that would provide the worthy poor a new start and serve as a buffer between Spanish Florida and the English colonies. Now, that thing I knew. I knew that it was designed basically to keep the Spanish from going north. The trustees prohibited slavery and large landholdings. Georgians would work themselves on small farms, and in the end, there were no debtors among them. So it maybe was more like a debtor's prison, and that's actually really, really common if you haven't heard of these before. It's basically you would imprison somebody for debt. We actually saw some of those debtor's prisons. Remember that, dear, when we went overseas to Britain?
Sure.
Oh, that makes sense. Georgia, named after King George. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, helping the poor and debt-ridden people of London. Which, if you guys haven't heard, like, and again, I don't know why you've heard about this, but the poor in London at this time with industrialization is incredibly high. There's a lot of people there who are just simply unemployed and walking around. Oh, this is interesting. The trustees placed a 500-acre limit on the size of individual land holdings because it's designed to benefit the poor. People would receive charity and who had not purchased their own land could sell or borrow, or could not sell or borrow money against it. They wanted to avoid the situation in South Carolina, which had very large plantations and extreme gaps between the wealthy and the poor. Huh. Yeah, and eventually what happens is that, yeah, I do remember this, is that they did not appreciate the restrictions on land sales, and then eventually also not being able to own slaves.
No, hot. No.
So, there you go.
You're okay. No. Play a game.
I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Let's see if have you guys asked anything.
Yeah.
Questions right now. Okay, I think I got that one.
Bless you.
Bless you, book.
Yay.
Gesundheit. Questions right now. Okay, I think I got them all. Okay, so hey, if you've got some like last minute questions, go ahead and ask them now, just because I want to make sure that like I get them addressed here, and I don't have much time because it's almost already 10 o'clock, and I'm gonna see you guys in like 8 hours, which is crazy. No world history questions tonight. Aw, feels bad, man. See if there's anything here I missed. Okay, so hey, you know, if you guys don't have any more, I'll give you a minute or so here to just like post them. But if you guys don't have anything by that time, I'll probably just go ahead and sign us off because I think we're close to an hour. I don't know how long it's been going on. Oh, an hour and 4 minutes is what I have here. So, and I was playing music for a few of that. That. We don't need this anymore. Drive. Make sure this is all set up and good to go. Okay, well hey, since you guys don't have any more questions, I'm going to go ahead and we'll just call it here, okay? But hopefully this was helpful. Again, and what I'll do for those people who haven't watched and you're watching this for the first time, or want to go back and review, is I'll make sure I link the questions with the time period, and so you can just jump right to them. So this is mostly just a DCUSH stream, so I'll make sure I go back and rename that appropriately. And other than that, guys, I will go ahead and rename this so it's the correct thing, and you guys have a good night, okay? Alright, peace.